Hi everyone, welcome back. And today we're going to be talking about soil. Uh, Soil is one of the most controversial topics to talk about um, because there's so many options and there's not only one that works. There's just a multitude of options that people use, and each of us has different opinion or a different experience, and it doesn't mean that what I do is the best, but I think that you should stick with what you believe works. Nevertheless, what I'm gonna the components that I'm going to talk about are the ones that are most known to have the best results. um, but I don't want to push the idea that I know this is the best. This is just what I believe and I've been having good results with. So I'll be talking about a mix that includes akadama, pumice, and lava rock. Also, we will be talking about top dressing and why we use top dressing, or I use top dressing. And lastly, I will be talking about one of the most wrongly used tools, which is a chopstick. I myself have been doing it wrong from the beginning, and I'll explain today, or I'll try to explain what I've learned and how to use it and why. Why to start giving it the proper use, and it's such an important thing for those that have only one tree or a couple trees, or it's not worth to buy separate components and do your own mix. I recommend that you buy the mix already prepared. Typically it's called bones mix, and it's going to be akadama, lava, rock, pumice, and I think it has charcoal and another ingredient. Anyway, the akadama, lava, rock, and pumice are mixed in a ratio of 1 to 1 to 1, or 2 to 1 to 1. And you can have it all online. I mean, I hear a lot that in my area I don't have these options to buy this kind of soil, but the truth is that it's available online, and I purchase or I prefer Superfly Bonsai. You also have a second option at Bonsai Jack, and Bonsai Jack doesn't use akadama. I think it uses Monto clay. So my preferred online shopping would be at Superfly. So if you have just a little amount of trees and you don't need a big amount or a bigger amount of soil, I would say just buy it ready, and skip this part about preparing your soil components, or watch it just to have in mind what you can do in the future. I buy my akadama from Superfly Bonsai. It's I buy the Kotokubi brand. This time I bought pumice and lava rock from Bonsai Jack. I do have to say that the lava rock and the pumice had a dimension that was a little above the dimensions that I needed. So there was a lot of, it's not, I wouldn't say that it's waste, but I'll definitely don't have a specific use for that dimension of that extra portion of higher dimension. Then I went to Superfly Bonsai and I ordered a Japanese pumice, and I gotta say that the Japanese soils are all very are have a dimension that is very good for what I want, which is up until 1/4 inch. And both the akadama and the Japanese pumice don't have any amount over a quarter inch. The pumice also doesn't have any fines, the Japanese pumice, but the lava rock and the pumice from Bonsai Jack also didn't have any fines, which is great. The Akadama, yeah, the Akadama will have always dust because of transportation, whatever. It doesn't have any amount over 1/4 inch, and we can actually use all the dimensions of the Akadama, as I'm gonna explain. So we have, so in my opinion, yeah, Superfly Bonsai is the best in terms of quality and in terms of dimension that I'm looking for. If you opt for the Japanese soils. I am not sure about the lava rock, but from what I know, the black lava rock from Superfly Bonsai is also very uniform in terms of dimension. So when we get the soil, it has a whole different dimensions that we don't really want to have it mixed. We ideally we get that soil separate, and we are going to sift the soil. I'm not sure if the word is sift or sieve, but I'll use sift, and forgive me if I'm doing a mistake. So I would say for a medium tree, you want to have the particles of your soil between 1/8 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch. If you're talking about shohin or small trees, you want to have it between 1/16 of an inch and 1/8 of an inch. And then that portion of Akadama, well, this in general, but in the lava rock and the pumice, you don't have nothing under 1/16 of an inch on bags that I bought, at least. But in the Akadama, you'll have, and you can use all that. If we can remove the dimensions that are approximately on the 1/16 of an inch and a little below, we can use that for propagation, although I'm not going to talk about that right now. And anything really on the dust side, you can use it to do muck. And I don't know if you know what is muck, but muck is used on rock buildings. Actually, let me see. I bought muck before, already made, but you can use it. You can make your own if you research about recipes, and yeah, it's good for SN plants, rock plantings, moss balls, creating kokedama, kusamono, and seki joju. I don't even know what it means, but I'm not gonna go there because I haven't actually tried to use this yet. Nevertheless, we do have purpose for the Akadama dust, and mixed with a couple other ingredients, you can do a good muck. Anyway, I got this set of sifts, I believe, on Amazon, and I have a 1/4 inch, 1/8 of an inch, 1/12 of an inch because they don't have 1/16, and 1/20 of an inch. Nevertheless, I have another one that is supposedly Japanese, and 1/12 is actually very similar to the 1/16. I didn't see really any difference. I don't know. Sometimes the thickness of the grid, whatever, might play a difference. Different brands, maybe a little margin for error there. So what I do is I use these two to get the 1/4 of an inch. I'll get the higher part of 1/4 of an inch, and I'll save it separately. And then I get 1/8 of an inch, and I save it over here, and I get the one between 1/4 and 1/8 of an inch. And I do the same for the other ones. So I get Here I'll get the medium-sized trees, regular trees, and when I get the 1/12 of an inch with 1/8 of an inch, I'll get the soil that I need for my showing. And for my showing, I really am planning in using 100% akadama. I'm going to show you the typical mix, and I'm going to show you the soils after sifting. If you take a look here, this is akadama after sifting, lava rock after sifting, pumice, and I also have sphagnum moss for the chop dressing, and I'll explain briefly what I've done about this sphagnum moss. So what I'll do is, in this case, and for conifers, in general, we would use a 1:1:1 ratio, and for the deciduous, 2:1:1, 2 parts of akadama, 1:1 pumice and lava rock for the deciduous. In this case, I'm just gonna try and take 1:1:1. Basically the same amount. Mix. And this would be my conifers mix. See. So virtually no dust, and this is exactly what we want. No dust, opportunity to have airflow, good drainage, good water retention, and one of the things that happens, especially in the heat of the summer, is that if this would be your pot, the top of the container, the soil part of the container would dry pretty fast. One of the options that you have is using a top dressing. I buy sphagnum moss from Amazon. It's a New Zealand sphagnum moss, high quality, and ideally you'd have moss. In my area I don't have moss. I'm actually trying to propagate moss, and as an experience I bought this Joshua Roth Kyoto moss spores. And if you'd have moss in your area, what you do is you would dry it, you would shred it with the sphagnum moss, and you'd mix 50-50, and that would be your top dressing. What I do, basically, I get the sphagnum moss and I shred it in the sift, and I get the same dimensions that I have for soil, 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch for medium trees, and 1/8 to 1/16 of an inch for showing trees. And in particular showing trees, this is very important because the soil really dries very fast, and what the sphagnum moss does is it keeps that water not only on the surface of the soil, but it also uniformizes the water spread and content within the soil. In a typical pot, you'd see that 30% of the soil on top would be very dry. The other 30%, 30-something percent in the middle would have the ideal moist water content, and then the bottom would be the death zone where there's too much water and would be favorable for root rot. When you put chop dressing, this sphagnum moss and moss mix on the top, it will suck let's say it sucks the water, and it just controls that difference of water content within the pot, uniformizing and allowing you to look at the moss and see better what's going on with the water within the pot. If you take a look at my sphagnum moss, it is actually dark gray. It's actually too dark. Normally I want to have it a little lighter gray, and that's because in terms of visual effect on the pot, this very light yellow moss does have a kind of a detrimental look. So what I do is I got a bucket with water. I put this ink that I bought on Amazon. It's Japanese calligraphy ink, and just put a little. We would have the moss already sifted, and I would get the moss in the bucket, and then I would see if it's enough ink. If not, I would put more, and in this case I did put a little too much. So the sphagnum moss would get the color of the ink. I would then take the sphagnum moss out, and I would spread it in a sheet to dry, and this is the final product after drying. I have this light sphagnum moss with uniformized size for my top dressing. It does take a little while to dry, and if it's wind, things can go a little wrong. Fortunately, I have a dehydration machine, and I actually put it inside. It was for vegetables, but I think my wife won't be very happy about that. Sorry. Yeah, I use that machine. It has a funky odor right now. I guess someone has to clean it. I will. Moving on. So I have the soil. We sift the soil. We get sphagnum moss. We sift the sphagnum moss. Then when it comes to time, I would mix the moss spores into the sphagnum moss to get the top dressing, and then we'll spread it on top when we repot. What's going to happen is that we'll have a uniform water content through the pot vertical length, and over time, over a few months, we'll start getting some fine beautiful moss that will allow to control even better that water content. Anyway, moving on, we have the chopstick situation. So what most of us have been doing when repotting is using one of those disposable chopsticks from takeout, and we put the soil in the pot, and then it's time to get it compact and get that soil into those areas, those air pockets, and we just go and start moving all over the place and going around the pot and kind of get down. And I do it. I know I've done it. But the fact is that we are using it a little wrong. So let me get this a little closer. The first thing about the chopsticks that I learned is that they should be bamboo, because bamboo has a hard part on the outside and a soft part on the inside. And then the tip of your chopstick should be prepared. I don't have bamboo, thick bamboo, so I'm going to use this, and this is what I'm going to try to utilize, although I'm trying to get some wider chopsticks. But I'll say ideally you'd have bamboo piece that you just split in straws and in chopsticks length, bigger, smaller according to your tree size and your soil. If it's shohin, if it's a small particle, you'll have a smaller chopstick. If it's a medium, bigger size tree, you'd have a longer and wider chopstick. But basically what you want to do is to, let me see if I can do this. First, let's do it here. Give it a cut over there, flip it, give it a cut again, making that arrow. I'm just going to make it a little more lengthy. And if this was a bamboo piece, this would be the hard part. You'd go to the soft part and you do that cut. Right there. So we have the hard part. We'd have an angle there and an angle on this side and an angle that goes to the hard part right there. Now this is particularly important. So this is particularly important because the fact that there's an angle here and it's narrow and pointy at the tip will allow you to move the soil in the direction you need, and also to move those roots, the thin roots, hanging in the direction that you need. It does seem almost ridiculous, the idea of it, but from what I've seen, it's really not. It really plays a big part, in particular when you go to small trees, shohin. But I think overall, and not the theory, the fact is that this is how it works, and I'm going to try to explain. I did my best to simulate some kind of a root system. I'm going to use this dead piece of wood. I'm going to use this as my pots, and I'm not going to talk about repotting. I'm going to have tons of repotting this spring, and we'll see it by then, but this is the theory behind it. Let's say that we did the bottom layer, then we have a little one in the middle, and these are the roots. They're spread a little bit all over. I'm going to sit down on the cone, and we're going to leave those roots there. Now we come in and you get more soil. I have no idea if this is going to work, but for the purpose of it, I hope that it does work. So ideally we'll fill it up really good, and at this point we'll be going to use the chopstick, and notice how the tip of the chopstick goes. The angle is going to be facing the trunk, and the flat part is going to be facing the outside of the pot. So what that does is that when I put it in, I'm actually pushing with that angle. I'll be pushing roots to the trunk direction, and as I go and chopstick in and out, the soil is hitting this ankle and filling up the spaces towards the trunk, right? So I'll be in, out, in, out, in, out, and the soil will be going in. Now, how do we do this? Is that if this was a shohin, I would be actually holding the soil a little like this, and from the rim with a little bit of an angle, I'll be going to the dip end of the pot. I would touch it, and at this point I'll be going in and out but with very little pressure. I'll be just, and as I do this, the soil will be filling those gaps very easily because this angle is pushing soil there. And you don't have to be pounding like I used to, because that will smash the akadama and create dust and compact the soil. But you'll see that if you go around, going to the bottom, then in, out, 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 and again. Of course, this is very crappy because it slides, but I was going to try to show what happens to the roots, but this is also very thick. But let's say that it is when I go there, and let's see if it does anything. I go deep, and well, it doesn't really work to show you what I meant, because this is just not flexible or just not thin like a root. But what would happen is that all those thinner roots all around, as I am putting the chopstick all the way in and putting the soil, those roots would actually fall towards the inside. Okay, and would get stuck there. And what happens is that when I was doing this with this thing, but come here, and I'll do like this, and then those roots would actually come up, and I couldn't get them back in again. So instead of just putting and moving it all over, which moves the soil a little bit crazy all the way, the ideal would be using this with that angle, going carefully to the bottom of the pot, and then just filling the gaps. And we do that all the way around, and then we go a little more to the middle, and then in the middle we're going to be even more careful and just try to see if there's still any gaps there and correct it. Right, so a little detail, and although this is not the ideal piece, you'll see that it's actually a very important detail. Makes the whole difference. And I see it. I have trees that in less than a year had the soil compact, and it had all to do with not sifting the soil and not properly chopsticking when repotting. So I probably made a lot of dust and compactation, and things really didn't work out so well. Oh, I almost forgot. So what happens to the top dressing, right? So let's say that this is done. And I have a little space in the rim so that when I water, the water goes in. Then I'll just come up with a sphagnum moss and the moss shredded, and I would just put this, what we call the top dressing. A little layer all over the place, and believe it or not, this would be enough to have a layer that keeps the water on the surface and avoids that drying. And what this does is that it allows the roots to actually develop more on the surface of your pots, instead of having those 30% without a lot of roots. And it also creates a darker environment, and roots really don't like light, because otherwise they would be going up instead of going down. So this will promote a health root system on the top layer of your bonsai trees. and after this I'll be misting the topsoil first, and then water thoroughly with a thin rain-like water system that will remove first all the dust that are still in the pot, and flush that dust soil, and that'll be it. But we'll see more of that in detail towards spring, when I'm going to be repotting. And I'll be repotting pretty early, because in California, in my zone 10B, things start really a lot earlier than other places, right? So I didn't want to get into much of other soil mixes, but I will say this: I haven't been using this exact mix of Akadama, pumice, and lava rock in my trees, but up until now, most of my trees are only in development, and nevertheless, the mix that I've been using is from a local club, and it's 50% Akadama, about probably 30 to 40% of lava rock, and it has a whole different components that I really don't know. They don't disclose what's the mix in, but I'll say this: the most important thing is that it has 50% Akadama. And when we talk about soil, we have to think that soil is what sustains your tree. It's like what you eat, what you drink. So it has to have, in terms of trees, it has to have that those characteristics about water absorption, airflow, nutrient exchange, and good drainage. And if you have good drainage, airflow, it's pretty clear to me that you'll have great results. And I just want to show you that my trees that are in this mix have shown tremendous amount of development on the roots, of producing finer roots. And this is what I get. If you can compare, this is about probably an inch and a half, and this was done, it was an earlier that I did last year spring, 2019 spring, from this mother tree, where this was the initial thickness, and look what I have in just a little over a year. It is a tremendous amount of thickening, of development, and it has a lot of branching, a lot of ramification. And when I look at all my trees, because they are all basically in this mix, I do see a lot of health and development of the roots, and consequent ramification. For example, these were seedlings that I planted on spring 2019. They were as thin as, was a lot less than this. It was actually something more like this kind of seedlings, just longer. And what happens is that the roots are super developed, because this tree fell on the floor. I was able to see that there was roots all over, and we had just a little bit in the beginning, just a little bit of roots in each tree. And I gain already thickness, I gain already ramification, and as you can see, they are looking beautifully healthy. And in a little bit of more than a year, I'm going to be able already to cut back, get a nice structure for a show-in forest that will move into that pot. And what I'm trying to say is that it really allows you to have fast results, good results, and a healthy tree. And I'm just going to go around and show you that these trees had were cut back a lot, very heavily trimmed, and look at how much foliar mass I have already, with a tremendous amount of root pruning, particularly because this is a tanuki. I was forced to trim, cut branches, trim the roots heavily, and I still have healthy growing trees all over the place. One last detail. When you mix your soil and when you do the repotting, make sure that your soil is completely dry. And the reason is that when you look at the soil, if you grab a little piece of akadama, hard akadama, really dry, it's super hard, and although you can crush it, it really just fragments into smaller pieces, but it still holds the structure. It's really hard, but once you get it wet, let me see if I can grab it. Let's see if it absorbs a little. Once you get it wet, if you squish it, it really dissolves like clay. So what happens is that if all your components are not dry, the kadama will absorb immediately that water, and when you use the chopstick, you'll be doing nothing but smushing the kadama and turning into clay, and you'll have a lot of compactation. I didn't want to get into a lot of discussion about using other options, like in particularly to akadama replacements, but I've been testing with the diatomaceous earth, the Napa Valley oil absorbent, which is DE, and I do have a tree in that particular DE option, and from what I see until now is that this Napa stuff is a lot softer than akadama, even dry. I can get a dry piece and crush it a little easier. It's still hard, but the biggest difference is that DE absorbs and it just retains too much water and takes forever to dry. So this will be wet forever, and I'm not sure if it's the best option. I'm not sure if it's gonna work. I'm confident that it still works fine, but it's just too much water for me, in particular in cold weather season, and one other factor is that DE doesn't allow the roots to penetrate the particle and fragments. And akadama, when the roots are developing, the roots will penetrate the akadama because it's porous and will fragment into smaller pieces, and that is not a bad thing. It actually promotes root splitting and division and finer roots. So if it doesn't have that feature where it breaks the akadama into smaller pieces of akadama, the DE will not allow, and the roots will just go around it. So it doesn't allow that splitting and promoting finer and finer roots that will also reflect on finer ramification on the branches.